The moment Dr. Daniel Crawford laughed and called her a liability in front of the entire emergency room, nobody could have imagined that within a few hours, one of the highest-ranking Marine officers in the country would walk through those same doors looking for her by name. The truth was simple. Everyone in that hospital thought they knew exactly who Abigail Harper was. They were wrong. Before we begin, thank you for supporting the channel and spending your time with us today. If you enjoy stories about courage, resilience, and extraordinary people hidden in plain sight, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue bringing you more unforgettable stories and experiences in future videos. Now let's begin. The emergency department at St. Matthew Regional Medical Center never truly slept. At 6:45 on a rainy Tuesday morning, the bright fluorescent lights reflected off polished floors while monitors beeped steadily and nurses moved quickly between patient rooms. The shift had already been difficult. Ambulances had arrived one after another throughout the night, leaving most of the staff exhausted before sunrise. Abigail Harper adjusted the badge clipped to her navy blue scrubs and quietly reviewed patient charts of the nurse's station. At 28 years old, she was one of the newest nurses in the department. 3 months earlier, she had joined the hospital with excellent references and a calm demeanor that many initially mistook for insecurity. She rarely spoke unless necessary. She never complained. She volunteered for unpopular assignments and stayed late whenever another nurse needed help. Unfortunately, kindness was often mistaken for weakness. "Harper, try not to slow everyone down today," Dr. Daniel Crawford said loudly as he approached the station carrying a tablet. Several staff members nearby glanced up. "We have enough problems without a rookie creating more." A few nurses chuckled quietly. Abigail simply nodded. "Yes, doctor." Crawford smirked. He seemed disappointed that she refused to argue. "That's all you've got to say?" he asked. "Just trying to focus on my patients," Abigail replied. The answer only generated more amused smiles from the surrounding staff. Over the past several weeks, she had become an easy target for jokes. Some called her the trainee. Others referred to her as the shadow because she rarely participated in break room conversations. Head nurse Rebecca Walsh was among the harshest critics. She believed emergency medicine required aggressive personalities and openly questioned whether Abigail belonged there at all. "Room 12 needs supplies restocked," Rebecca announced. "And after that, transport paperwork. Leave the critical cases to people with experience." Abigail accepted the assignment without complaint. As she turned away, she heard another round of laughter behind her. None of them noticed that she never reacted. None of them noticed how carefully she observed everything around her. And none of them knew why someone with her unusual composure seemed completely unaffected by humiliation. The morning continued until a sudden call came through the emergency communications line. The atmosphere changed instantly. A patient was arriving under urgent circumstances. Doctors moved toward the trauma bay. Nurses gathered equipment. Conversations stopped. As the ambulance crew rushed through the entrance moments later, Abigail caught sight of the patient information displayed on the intake screen. For the first time all day, her expression changed. Only slightly. Barely enough for anyone else to notice. But she recognized the name immediately. And as the stretcher rolled past her toward the trauma room, Abigail felt something she had not felt in years. Concern. The name on the intake screen was Colonel Nathan Brooks. Abigail felt her pulse pause for a fraction of a second before she forced herself back into the calm rhythm she had perfected long ago. Around her, nobody noticed. Doctors were already discussing procedures. Nurses were preparing equipment. The controlled urgency of the emergency department swallowed every other detail. Abigail lowered her eyes to the chart and continued walking as if the name meant nothing. Inside, however, memory she had spent years burying began to stir. "Harper, what are you standing around for?" Rebecca Walsh called from across the station. "Supplies are not going to stock themselves." Several people glanced toward Abigail. She immediately nodded. Right away, Rebecca shook her head. "I still do not understand how you made it through hiring." A few staff members laughed. Abigail picked up a supply card and continued down the hallway without responding. The reaction only seemed to encourage them. To everyone else, she looked exactly the same as always. Quiet, forgettable, easy to overlook. The truth was that she had spent most of her life learning how to disappear when necessary. As she restocked treatment rooms, fragments of the past surfaced without permission. She remembered a dry desert wind. She remembered long nights without sleep. Most of all, she remembered a younger Nathan Brooks speaking with absolute confidence even when everyone around him was uncertain. She quickly pushed the thoughts away. That life belonged to another person, another version of herself, one she had worked very hard to leave behind. An overhead announcement interrupted her thoughts. Additional staff were requested near the trauma wing. Abigail finished organizing the last supply cabinet and headed toward the nurse's station. As she approached, she noticed Dr. Crawford reviewing Colonel Brooks's chart. "Retired Marine officer," Crawford said. "Probably thinks his rank still matters." Several employees smiled. Rebecca crossed her arms. "Most of them do." Abigail kept walking. She neither agreed nor disagreed. Crawford noticed her approaching and smirked. "Good news, Harper. Since you seem to enjoy simple assignments, you can handle paperwork for this case." More laughter followed. Abigail accepted the clipboard. "Of course." Crawford shook his head. "You really never stand up for yourself, do you?" Abigail offered a polite smile and continued on her way. A few minutes later, she entered a quieter hallway outside an observation room. For the first time all morning, she was alone. She opened the clipboard and carefully reviewed the intake information. The photograph attached to the record showed an older version of the man she remembered, but the eyes were unmistakable. Nathan Brooks, the same man, the same officer, the same person who should never have known she was here. Abigail slowly closed the file. Around her neck, hidden beneath her scrubs, a small metal coin rested against her skin. She had not touched it in months. Yet without realizing it, her fingers found it now. The worn edges felt familiar, grounding, dangerous. A voice suddenly echoed from inside the nearby room, weak but clear enough to hear. One sentence, one name, a name nobody at the hospital could possibly understand. Angel 7. Abigail froze. The clipboard nearly slipped from her hands. Because Angel 7 was not a nickname. It was a call sign, and only a handful of people in the world had ever known it belonged to her. Abigail remained motionless for several seconds after hearing the call sign. The hallway suddenly felt much smaller. Very few people had ever known that name, and even fewer were still alive to remember it. She took a slow breath and forced herself to move. Whatever Nathan Brooks remembered, whatever he thought he recognized, none of it could matter now. She was a nurse at St. Matthew Regional Medical Center. That was all anyone here needed to know. By the time she returned to the nurse's station, the familiar rhythm of the emergency department had resumed. Phones hung. Monitors beeped. Staff moved quickly between rooms. Yet the moment Abigail stepped behind the counter, Rebecca Walsh found another reason to criticize her. "There you are," Rebecca said sharply. "I asked for paperwork 20 minutes ago." Abigail handed over the completed forms, finished and organized by department. Rebecca glanced through them and frowned. Everything was perfect. Every page was complete. Every signature was where it belonged. She seemed disappointed. "Next time, move faster." Abigail nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Dr. Crawford overheard the exchange and laughed. You could hand Rebecca a winning lottery ticket, and she would still find a problem with it. Several nurses smiled. Rebecca crossed her arms. "I just expect competence." Crawford looked toward Abigail. "Then we should probably lower expectations." More laughter followed. Abigail simply returned to reviewing patient charts. Her lack of reaction irritated people more than any argument could have. Most employees eventually snapped back when pushed hard enough. Abigail never did. The truth was that she had learned years ago that pride could become a liability. Silence often revealed far more than words. Throughout the afternoon, she continued helping wherever needed. She restocked supplies, assisted families, covered breaks for exhausted coworkers. When a confused, elderly patient became anxious, Abigail spent 20 minutes calmly talking with him until he relaxed. No supervisors noticed. No one offered thanks. It was simply expected. Around 3 o'clock, a young nurse named Hannah approached her quietly. Hannah had only worked at the hospital for 6 months and was one of the few people who treated Abigail kindly. "Can I ask you something?" Hannah said. "Of course." Hannah lowered her voice. "How do you stay so calm all the time?" Abigail smiled faintly. "Practice." "No, seriously. Crawford and Rebecca are impossible. If they treated me like that every day, I would quit." Abigail considered the question. Sometimes people judge what they see. It does not mean they know the whole story. Hannah looked confused. "That sounds like something from a movie." Abigail laughed softly. "Maybe." Before Hannah could respond, a hospital volunteer rushed toward the station. "The Marine officer is awake." Several staff members immediately turned toward the observation wing. Crawford straightened his coat and headed down the hallway. Rebecca followed close behind. Curious employees drifted after them. Abigail remained where she was, pretending to focus on charts. Minutes later, voices echoed from the corridor. Nathan Brooks was speaking with the medical staff. Then came a question that instantly changed the atmosphere. "Where is Abigail Harper?" Silence followed. Rebecca looked back toward the station. Crawford did the same. For the first time all day, every eye in the emergency department settled on Abigail. And for reasons none of them understood, the retired Marine colonel appeared far more interested in the rookie nurse than in any doctor in the building. The silence inside the emergency department felt almost unnatural. For weeks, Abigail Harper had blended into the background so completely that many employees barely noticed when she entered a room. Now every conversation had stopped. Every head had turned toward her. Colonel Nathan Brooks sat upright in his hospital bed at the far end of the corridor, his eyes fixed on the rookie nurse standing beside the station. Rebecca Walsh recovered first. "Colonel Brooks, is there a problem?" she asked politely. Nathan never looked away from Abigail. "No problem." His voice remained calm. "I asked a question. Where is Abigail Harper?" Rebecca pointed toward the station. "That is her." For a moment, nobody moved. Abigail wished she could disappear. Instead, she slowly set down her clipboard and walked toward the observation room. The staff watched closely. Some expected confusion. Others expected embarrassment. What they did not expect was the expression on the colonel's face. It was not recognition alone. It was respect. Genuine respect. Abigail stopped beside the doorway. "Good afternoon, Colonel." Nathan studied her carefully. The years had changed both of them, but not enough. "It really is you." Abigail offered a professional smile. "You should be resting." Nathan almost laughed. "That sounds exactly like something you would say." Rebecca exchanged a confused glance with Dr. Crawford. Neither of them understood what they were seeing. Crawford stepped forward. "You two know each other?" Abigail immediately answered. "The colonel is a patient." Nathan raised an eyebrow. Even now, she was trying to redirect attention. Some habits never changed. "That is not what he asked," Nathan replied. Abigail's smile faded slightly. Crawford folded his arms. "Well," Nathan looked toward the physician. "Many years ago, I worked with someone named Angel 7. The words landed like a stone in still water. Abigail's expression remained controlled, but her pulse quickened. Crawford frowned. "Angel 7? Nathan nodded. "A call sign." Rebecca laughed softly. "You are not suggesting our rookie nurse was in the military?" Nathan did not answer immediately. Instead, he studied Abigail. She gave the smallest shake of her head. A warning. A request. "Please do not do this." Nathan understood immediately. Whatever history she was hiding, she wanted it hidden for a reason. Before anyone could ask another question, a sudden alarm echoed from a nearby treatment room. The atmosphere changed instantly. Medical staff rushed into motion. A patient in another wing required immediate attention. Crawford and Rebecca hurried toward the room along with several nurses. Abigail automatically moved to assist. Within seconds, she was working alongside the others. Orders were exchanged. Equipment was organized. Information flowed rapidly between departments. Through it all, Abigail remained remarkably calm. Nathan watched from his bed. He noticed details others missed. The way she anticipated needs before requests were spoken. The way she moved efficiently without wasting a single step. The way nervous staff unconsciously looked toward her whenever uncertainty appeared. They still did not see it. They still thought they were watching a rookie nurse. Nearly 20 minutes later, the situation stabilized. Relief spread throughout the department. Staff returned to their assignments. Crawford removed his gloves and shook his head. At least that crisis is over. Nathan continued watching Abigail from across the hallway. Then he noticed something unexpected. As she adjusted her scrub collar, a thin chain briefly slipped into view. Hanging from it was a worn metal coin. Nathan's eyes widened instantly, because he recognized that coin, and there were only a handful of people on Earth who had ever been authorized to carry one. For the rest of the afternoon, Nathan Brooks could not take his eyes off the coin. Every time Abigail moved, he found himself looking for it again, wondering if he had somehow made a mistake. Yet deep down he knew he had not. That coin was not something a person could buy. It was not a souvenir. It was not a decoration. It represented membership in a small circle of people whose service records rarely appeared in public documents. Abigail noticed his attention immediately. The moment their eyes met across the corridor, she subtly tucked the chain back beneath her scrub collar. The message was clear. Not here. Not now. Nathan understood, but the discovery had already changed everything. Meanwhile, the rest of the emergency department remained completely unaware of the significance of what had just happened. Dr. Crawford was more interested in discussing schedules than military history. Rebecca Walsh was focused on staffing shortages. To them, Abigail was still the same inexperienced nurse they had mocked all day. Harper, room 18 needs assistance, Rebecca called. And try not to take all afternoon. Abigail immediately headed toward the room. As usual, she responded without complaint. Nathan watched her disappear down the hallway. The more he observed her, the more obvious the truth became. She had not changed. Years had passed. Uniforms had changed. Locations had changed. But the habits remained exactly the same. She still moved with quiet efficiency. She still noticed details other people missed. And she still preferred letting others underestimate her. An hour later, another unexpected challenge appeared. A patient in the cardiac observation area began experiencing complications. Nothing dramatic, nothing dangerous, but enough to create concern among the less experienced staff members. Nurses hurried between rooms. Physicians reviewed information. Several voices overlapped as people attempted to coordinate the next steps. Abigail arrived only moments later. She quietly reviewed the chart, checked the monitor, and spoke calmly with the patient. Within minutes, she identified a simple issue that had been overlooked during a shift transition. The solution was straightforward. The patient stabilized quickly. The tension immediately disappeared. Lucky guess, Crawford muttered when someone mentioned Abigail's role. Nathan almost laughed. A lucky guess. That was how they explained everything. Every success, every observation, every example of unusual competence. They refused to consider any explanation that challenged their assumptions. Later, as evening approached, Nathan requested a private conversation with Abigail. She entered his room carrying a tablet and a professional smile. "How are you feeling, Colonel?" Nathan waited until the door closed. "You know the coin gave you away." Abigail sighed. "I was afraid of that." "Do they know?" "No." "Why?" Abigail looked out the window for several seconds before answering. "Because I came here to be a nurse." Nathan studied her expression carefully. There was no bitterness, no anger, only certainty. "And if someone recognizes you?" he asked. Abigail smiled faintly. "Then I suppose I will deal with it when the time comes." Before Nathan could respond, his phone vibrated on the bedside table. He glanced at the screen. The moment he saw the caller identification, his expression changed completely. Abigail noticed immediately. "Everything okay?" Nathan slowly looked up. "That depends." He answered the call, listened for several seconds, and then stood despite the protests of his recovering body. When he ended the conversation, his voice was unusually serious. "Abigail, there's someone coming to this hospital tomorrow morning." "Who?" Nathan held her gaze. "Someone who remembers Angel 7 even better than I do." Abigail did not sleep much that night. After her shift ended, she drove home through quiet streets, but Nathan's words stayed with her the entire time. Someone who remembered Angel 7 even better than he did. There were very few people who fit that description. Fewer still who would travel across the country simply because they heard a name. The next morning she arrived at St. Matthew Regional Medical Center 20 minutes early, just as she always did. The hospital was beginning to wake up. Night shift nurses were finishing reports. Day shift staff carried coffee cups through the hallways. Nothing seemed unusual. For a moment, Abigail allowed herself to believe Nathan had been mistaken. Then she walked into the emergency department and immediately sensed something was different. Conversations were quieter. Employees kept glancing toward the front entrance. Even Rebecca Walsh appeared distracted. "What happened?" Abigail asked Hannah while organizing charts. Hannah lowered her voice. "Nobody knows. Administration received a call before sunrise. Apparently some very important visitor is coming today." Abigail continued working. "Maybe a donor." Hannah shook her head. "That is what I thought too. But security has been walking around all morning." Before Abigail could respond, Dr. Crawford approached the station. "Listen up, everyone. Hospital administration wants the department looking perfect today. No mistakes. No surprises. And for once, Harper, try not to embarrass us." Several employees laughed automatically. Abigail simply nodded. The familiar reaction should have annoyed her. Instead, she found herself strangely relieved. If people were still making the same jokes, then nothing had changed. She was still invisible, still overlooked, still safe. Around 9:30, Nathan Brooks was discharged from observation and moved to a private recovery room while awaiting transportation. Before leaving the emergency department, he found Abigail near a supply cabinet. "You should prepare yourself," he said quietly. Abigail smiled. "For what?" Nathan returned the smile. "You always ask that question even when you already know the answer." Before she could reply, the sound of approaching vehicles echoed outside the hospital entrance. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. Yet the reaction inside the building was immediate. Security personnel began moving toward the lobby. Administrative staff hurried through the hallways. Several nurses stepped closer to the windows. Hannah looked outside first. Wow! More employees followed. Curiosity spread throughout the department. Dr. Crawford walked toward the entrance with Rebecca close behind. Abigail remained where she was. She had no interest in seeing whoever had arrived. Then she noticed Nathan standing perfectly still. His expression had changed. Respect, recognition, concern. Slowly, Abigail turned toward the front doors. Through the glass entrance, she could see several individuals stepping into the lobby. Most wore business attire. One man stood out immediately. Tall, gray-haired, impeccable posture. Every movement carried quiet authority. Hospital administrators rushed forward to greet him. The visitor acknowledged them politely, but seemed completely uninterested in their introductions. Instead, his eyes scanned the lobby as if searching for someone specific. A few seconds later, one of the administrators approached Dr. Crawford. The visitor would like to speak with department leadership. Crawford straightened his coat. Rebecca smiled confidently. Both followed the administrator toward the lobby. Abigail watched from a distance. Then she heard the question that caused Nathan Brooks to close his eyes and quietly shake his head. The visitor looked directly at the administrators and asked, "Before we discuss anything else, where can I find Abigail Harper?" The question seemed to drain the sound from the entire lobby. Hospital administrators exchanged confused looks. Dr. Crawford blinked several times as if he had misheard. Rebecca Walsh glanced toward the emergency department entrance where Abigail stood frozen beside the nurse's station. The visitor followed their gaze immediately. The moment his eyes landed on Abigail Harper, something remarkable happened. His serious expression softened, not into a smile, into recognition, the kind reserved for someone whose name carries weight long after years have passed. Nathan Brooks watched from across the corridor and quietly exhaled. He had expected this. Abigail had hoped it would never happen. The visitor walked forward with calm confidence. Administrators hurried after him. Staff members moved aside without being asked. Even people who had no idea who he was could sense the authority surrounding him. Dr. Crawford quickly stepped into his path. "Sir, I am Dr. Daniel Crawford, attending physician. If there is anything we can help you with." The visitor nodded politely, but continued walking. "Thank you, doctor." Then he looked past him. Abigail. The use of her first name sent another ripple through the department. Abigail stood motionless for a moment before stepping forward. "General Mercer." Several employees visibly reacted. The title alone was enough to attract attention. Rebecca's eyes widened. Crawford straightened immediately. The visitor standing before them was not simply an important guest. He was General Thomas Mercer, one of the most respected Marine officers in the country. Yet he seemed completely uninterested in anyone, except the rookie nurse everyone had spent weeks mocking. "It has been a long time," Mercer said. Abigail offered a small smile. "Yes, sir." The general studied her carefully, still hiding. Several nearby employees exchanged confused glances. Abigail lowered her eyes slightly. "I prefer nursing." To everyone's surprise, Mercer laughed. "That sounds exactly like you." Nathan Brooks slowly approached from the recovery wing. When the general noticed him, the two men shook hands warmly. "Nathan," Mercer said, "good to see you standing." "Good to see you too, General." Then Nathan nodded toward Abigail. "I told you she would try to disappear." Mercer smiled knowingly. "She always does." By now, nearly every available employee had gathered nearby. Nurses, physicians, technicians, administrative staff. Nobody understood what they were witnessing. Rebecca finally spoke. "General Mercer, forgive me, but how exactly do you know Nurse Harper?" The question hung in the air. Abigail immediately looked toward Mercer. Another silent request. "Do not answer." "Not yet." The general noticed. So did Nathan. For several seconds, Mercer remained quiet. Then he looked back at Rebecca. "That is a long story." Crawford forced a laugh. "Well, she certainly never mentioned knowing a Marine general." Mercer turned toward him. The smile vanished. "That is because Abigail Harper has never been interested in talking about herself." Something about the way he said made the room fall silent again. Then Mercer reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and carefully removed a small object wrapped in cloth. When he unfolded it, Nathan Brooks immediately recognized it. His eyes widened. Abigail's expression changed for the first time all day, because resting in the general's hand was a military challenge coin identical to the one hidden beneath her scrubs. And engraved across its surface were the words, "Angel 7. The emergency department became so quiet that even the distant hum of ventilation systems seemed unusually loud. Every eye remained fixed on the coin in General Mercer's hand. Most employees had no idea what it meant, but they understood enough to recognize that something important was unfolding directly in front of them. Abigail looked at the coin for several seconds before speaking. "I have not seen that in a long time." Mercer nodded. "I kept it for a reason." Nathan Brooks folded his arms. "I told you she would not make this easy." A faint smile appeared on the general's face. "No, she never does." Dr. Crawford stepped forward, unable to contain his curiosity any longer. "Can someone please explain what is happening?" Mercer slowly turned toward the gathering crowd. His expression became serious again. "Most of you know Abigail Harper as a nurse." He paused. "That is certainly who she is today." Several staff members exchanged confused looks. Mercer continued. "What you do not know is that before becoming a nurse, Abigail served her country in a role that required extraordinary skill, discipline, and courage." Abigail immediately shook her head. "General," Mercer met her eyes. "You spent years protecting everyone else. Allow someone else to speak for you for once." The room remained silent. Rebecca Walsh looked completely stunned. Hannah stared at Abigail as though seeing her for the first time. Nathan leaned against the wall and quietly watched the reactions unfold. Mercer carefully held up the coin. Angel 7 was not a nickname. It was a call sign assigned only to one individual. He looked directly at Abigail. Her. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Even Dr. Crawford seemed unable to find words. Mercer continued. "Years ago, Abigail served as a highly respected Marine Force Recon combat medic attached to specialized operations units around the world. A wave of disbelief spread through the room. Rebecca blinked repeatedly. "That is impossible." Nathan laughed softly. "That was our reaction the first time we met her, too." Mercer nodded. "Most people underestimated her. They always did, until they worked beside her." Abigail lowered her gaze, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. The general continued anyway. During her service, Abigail earned distinctions that very few people ever receive. Not because she sought recognition. Quite the opposite. She avoided it whenever possible. Hannah looked at Abigail with amazement. "You were really in the Marines?" Abigail answered quietly. "A long time ago." Mercer shook his head. "Not long enough for people to forget." Then he looked toward the staff surrounding him. "Nathan Brooks is alive today because of decisions Abigail made years ago. So are many others." Nathan nodded once. "That is true." Dr. Crawford stared at Abigail. The same woman he had mocked repeatedly now seemed like a complete stranger. Every assumption he had made about her suddenly felt ridiculous. Mercer slowly returned the coin to its cloth wrapping. "The funny thing is that none of this surprises me." He gestured toward the emergency department around them. "Because the same qualities that made her exceptional then are the exact qualities that make her exceptional now." Several nurses looked down uncomfortably. They remembered every joke, every dismissive comment, every time they had treated her like she did not belong. Mercer glanced at his watch before looking back at Abigail. "There is one more thing." Abigail immediately recognized the tone in his voice. Whatever came next was something she had been hoping to avoid. And, judging by the expression on Nathan Brooks's face, he already knew exactly what the general was about to do. Abigail already knew what was coming. The moment General Mercer stepped forward, she felt every eye in the emergency department follow him. The room remained completely silent. Doctors, nurses, administrators, and patients stood frozen, waiting to see what would happen next. Mercer stopped a few feet in front of her. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Years of history seemed to pass between them without a single word. Then the general carefully reached into his jacket and removed the challenge coin once more. He held it in both hands before extending it toward Abigail. "This belongs with you," he said quietly. Abigail looked at the coin, but did not immediately take it. "General, that is not necessary." Nathan Brooks smiled from across the room. "That answer sounds familiar too." A few people laughed nervously. Mercer shook his head. "Perhaps, but neither of us came here to discuss what is necessary." He paused. "We came here because some things deserve to be remembered." Slowly, Abigail accepted the coin. The worn metal felt familiar in her hand. For years, she had tried to leave that chapter of her life behind. Not because she was ashamed of it, because she never wanted it to define her. She had come to St. Matthew Regional Medical Center for a simple reason. She wanted to help people. Nothing more, nothing less. Mercer looked around the department. For weeks, perhaps months, many of you have seen Abigail Harper as the least experienced person in this room. Nobody answered. Several employees lowered their eyes. What you did not know is that she spent years serving others long before she ever walked into this hospital. He turned back toward Abigail. Then, in front of every employee present, General Thomas Mercer stood perfectly straight and raised his hand in a formal salute. The reaction was immediate. Shock spread through the room. Several nurses covered their mouths. Administrators stared in disbelief. Dr. Crawford looked as though the floor had disappeared beneath him. Rebecca Walsh could not stop blinking. The highest-ranking person any of them had ever met was saluting the rookie nurse they had spent weeks dismissing. Abigail stood motionless for a second before returning the gesture with quiet dignity. "No pride, no triumph, no anger, just respect." Nathan Brooks nodded slowly. "About time," he said softly. Mercer lowered his hand. "Thank you, Abigail." The words carried more weight than anyone there could fully understand. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Finally, Dr. Crawford stepped forward. His usual confidence was gone. "Abigail, I owe you an apology." She looked at him calmly. Crawford shook his head. Actually, several apologies. Rebecca stepped forward as well. You deserve better from all of us. Abigail glanced around the room. Every face looked different now. Not because she had changed, because they finally saw what had been there all along. She smiled gently. We all have